Teaching at Polaris, what did I learn and how did it change me as a teacher? Our theme was given to us, which was science and art. Our theme explored the sun, moon, and stars. We wanted our students to be both scientists and artists. So when we made cyanotypes, it was something affected by the sun. When we made nebulas, it was personal to them. And when we made supernovas, it was what they discovered. We wanted students to be engaged with everything, which was kind of hard. So we wanted students really to relate back to what they were making. So we made it kind of choice-based. When teaching, we learned that about 95% of students would be sitting there working, while the other 5% would have to be kind of generated with ideas and put back into the art mode. We also learned skills went hand in hand with materials. So when we introduced the cyanotypes, it was a new material and students were learning kind of this new skill. And I learned that translated when I watched students talking to younger generations or like a younger grade level about what they had learned and what the cyanotypes were. Also, materials were something that I learned were kind of tricky just because we weren't in our own art classroom. So we had to either embrace bringing the bucket with us everywhere, which kind of stunk, and I can't wait to have my own art classroom, or we made the students explore and find materials. I also learned accidents are to be embraced with open arms. When we did the cyanotypes, they washed clear, and we felt the same way the students did. What happened, the picture in the middle is kind of a reflection of how the student felt, and we just had to learn and roll with it for the next week. We learned with the students on this. I also learned to be very, very patient. Cleaning in a classroom that was not yours, and I'm sure when I do get my own classroom, you have to just be patient, because even though you tell a kid not to put their hand in the shaving cream, they're probably going to do it anyway. I also learned sometimes you have to revisit lesson plans and rewrite them. I learned this with the cyanotype one. Daniel and I had to add an extra day into our paper marbling that was dedicated to cyanotypes so they could go and recreate another one. That was better. And also some stuff students were just more passionate about than others, which I learned in lesson planning. If students were really engaged and felt passionate about something, it just meant that we had to spend a little extra time on it, or if maybe they weren't so engaged in it, that just meant we had to move on from it. I also learned you have to collaborate with others in a positive and professional manner. Daniel and I took turns being the teacher. When it came to demos, we kind of took those turns, but there were routines that we didn't change too much. Daniel reflected the blog every class, where I kind of kept control of the side chatter, and I also managed a lot of cleanup. What worked best for us was a lot of communication. Sometimes we would have to talk to each other about, hey, I don't know if so-and-so is going to create, and also communication with the students. Sometimes I just have to sit down with a student and be like, well, what can I do to make you want to create? So that's why there are watercolors for that student to create with. Also, we had to respond to needs. Some students did need redirecting, like what was brought up before. Alicia was a huge advocate of the discovery method, which we had one student who we would get to a 3 every day, but as soon as we talked to him in the hall, the student would be redirected and back on work with no problems. We had a wild bunch of kids, as Alicia described, so every once in a while we would have to redirect them back into art. They were also, when they were in the moment, they were so understanding, and I never realized that kids could talk about their art so well, but they really can. They are very good at explaining things and what they enjoy about them. So I think overall we didn't have too many weaknesses. Something that I touched on before was the traveling with materials. It got very exhausting, and cleanup really put me on edge sometimes. At one point we had a student drop blue acrylic paint in the carpet and it didn't come up, and I thought, that day our homeroom teacher is going to hate us. She didn't end up hating us, but boy did it have a lot of stress when it happened. Our second weakness was kind of not facilitating that discovery method soon enough. There were times I would tell a student, you're at a 1 and no change, and then I would tell them you're at a 2 and no change. They would smell my bluff, and sometimes they wouldn't stop whatever they were doing. If I would have kind of facilitated that discovery method before, it would have been almost a safer environment with less chaos. The cyanotypes, we weren't prepared for that to wash clear, but we embraced it with open arms. Looking back, we handled it really well, but we weren't prepared for that. We also had students painting on their clothes and their hair, even though we told them not to, and everyone would be the bad guy and insist on rules to be followed, but rules do create a safe environment to work in. Cleanup was a huge weakness. I kind of touched on that before. Shaving cream was a lot. Something that we could learn from, or what I learned from, is bring smocks and gloves. Monoprinting, I feel like there needed to be more clear expectations for this one. Some students understood the idea of finding a supernova and replicating it, where other students just wanted to create, and throw away. In some cases, it's okay to throw away and try again, but in some cases, we really wanted our students to stick with the supernova idea. When we introduced the acrylic paint, I was hoping students would explore it onto their monoprints, but some students scrapped the monoprint idea completely and just painted to paint. I even asked one student if the flower they painted was for the supernova, and they said, no, it's for me. If we would have had a clear explanation from the beginning, I think some of those students would have stayed on task, but that's not to say students were all off task. Only a few. Like, here are some monoprints and kind of designs of their supernova from before. And thanks for being a part of my learning.